At Restore 3D, we believe that every patient deserves personalized care. As a world leader in patient-specific 3D printed musculoskeletal implants everywhere in the human body, we leverage cutting-edge technology to transform patient outcomes. Our proprietary expertise in 3D printing osseo-integrated materials, AI-based planning and design automation tools, and digital health solutions ensures seamless data-backed care. Join us in reimagining the musculoskeletal reconstructive landscape. Learn more at restore3d.com. That's Restore3D, where every innovation meets personalization. It's so great to be able to speak to unique orthopedic surgeons that have just, created an amazing history for themselves and for the education that they do. We're bringing on Bill Bugbee, who is a real unicorn when it comes to orthopedics. He is all about joint preservation. He is one of the world's leading authorities on osteochondral allografts and trying to preserve the knee. He calls the joint as an organ. I love that. He also has a very busy joint replacement practice as well, and literally got in on the ground floor in about 1995 or so, and has been an absolute leader in the field of cartilage and cartilage restoration. And it's just amazing to speak to someone who's living history, who's been able to follow along with this. I was educated and really enjoyed the conversation. It is a great episode. You're going to like it just as much as I did. Dr. Scott Sigman, hashtag follow the fro.
From medical media, this is The Ortho Show.
Hello, world. Dr. Scott Sigman, your favorite opioid-sparing orthopedic surgeon, here for another episode of the popular Ortho Show podcast, where everyone knows we bring you the best of the best, and we have no exception today. We are going West Coast. We have William Bugbee, who is a professor, Department of Orthopedic Surgery, out at Scripps Clinic. He's the fellowship director for joint reconstruction, but he also preserves cartilage and restoration as well. He's kind of a unique individual in that regard. And he is in beautiful La Jolla, California, where everybody wants to be. Bill, what a pleasure it is to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
It's terrific. We're really
today here.
I'm sure it's every day is a beautiful day in La Jolla. You don't even have screens out there. You don't even have bugs, for crying out loud.
Yes. And I will tell you, my office overlooks the Torrey Pines Golf Course, just to rub salt in the wound.
Yeah, well, we really greatly appreciate the struggle that you have to get from work and the terrible views that you have. I know it's hard work. If you were smart, you were a smart guy, because you've been there pretty much your whole career and your whole life. So right. I want to talk about that in particular. So listen, we always start the show because we want to know about you. Where did it begin? Where did you grow up? Were your parents doctors? When was this whole orthopedic thing sort of coming into focus for you?
Yeah, good story. No doctors, no orthopedists in my family. I remember my dad owned a bunch of bars at the beach in California. I was, like you, interested in biology, so I decided I liked nature and biology, and had a biology degree at UCLA, was going to be a plant geneticist. And you remember when we were just splitting the DNA and everyone thought that was the future, we'd feed the world, and figured out I liked people. So figured out what I could do with science and people, and medicine came to being. And of course, being an athlete, I played soccer at UCLA. Orthopedics was natural. And then it grew from there, and loved science, went to med school, and I liked, like you do, I liked orthopedic surgeons. They were my kind of people. They were fun, happy, and loved their work, and evolved to there, and ended up in San Diego going to med school residency. And after that, I interestingly chose, instead of sports, which would seem natural, I chose joint replacement because I really liked fixing things, and ended up kind of doing that. So my journey was not too different than most, but along the way, I got to go to a lot of places, see a lot of things. So I'm pretty happy. I feel blessed. I mean, I came from nothing, no medicine, worked my way through school, and that's where I am now. And it's been a great ride. I feel totally blessed.
Fantastic. Now, were you born and bred in San Diego area or more Los
Yeah,
Angeles? Yeah.
geography. No, I was born in Southern California, Hermosa Beach, South Bay. My parents split when I was young, and my dad moved to Hawaii. So I would spend time with my dad in Hawaii and time with my mom in Southern and Northern California, and ended up going to high school in Hawaii. Little factoid, I went to high school with Barack Obama. So I'm old enough to say when he became president, that was my epiphany that the first time in my life a president was younger than me, and it really hurt.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I'm assuming you can verify his birth certificate as being born okay as far as his United States birth
no, but I
certificate.
know who he was smoking marijuana with, so
Oh,
that's that.
okay.
And I can share with you the picture of a chubby Barry Obama with an afro. It's not like he is now, but
Well,
anyway. So
we follow the fro for President Obama too, as we like to say
yes,
for
yes,
me. I
yes.
love it.
But so I would say my hometown is Honolulu, Hawaii, because my formative years were there for growing up, close friends. But for all intents and purposes, after college, I was a couple years in Arkansas in private practice, a year of fellowship back east, but been basically in San Diego since, mostly since 97 when I went to the university after a couple years of private practice. So this is my hometown, San Diego.
Awesome. I have very fond memories of Redondo Beach, which is right
Yes.
next to Hermosa Beach when I was doing my Curlin Joe Fellowship in 1995 and 96. So I'm dating myself as well. Uh,
Ironic, my dad went to Redondo Union High School.
well, there you go. And the pier and all of that, and what was it called? The pearl thing, the strand where you could
Strand,
rollerblade
right?
and all of that.
Redondo
You
Break
go right
One.
by Taboni's house down on
Yeah.
Hermosa Beach. So yeah, really very fond memories. So listen, my oldest is in Carlsbad, so he's got the San Diego bug. So he
Smart.
does.
Very good.
We're gonna educate our listeners here about two very important things because the two things that he loves out in San Diego is surfing and tacos. So give us the best surf break because it's been whispered in my ear with your time in Hawaii and San Diego that you're a surfer still.
Yes. My garage is full of surfboards, not any other toys. And I wouldn't be a good surfer if I told you the secret spots. That's a totally
Yeah, I
no-no.
know. That is a
But
big secret, but that's
But I
okay.
will tell you that the most famous would be Black's Beach. And when I was in medical school, we had the medical school happened to have a key to the gate. It's a private, the university owns the property. So to get down to the cliff to the beach was an effort. So we always grabbed the key on Friday and went surfing all weekend long. And it's long since changed, but Black's would be the one. But I surf in the North County. So anywhere, Del Mar, Carlsbad, that area. But as you get older, as you know, just like if you go on a ski vacation, you go on surf vacations.
There
So if
you
you want
go.
to the best places to surf, I would tell you Hawaii, Fiji, Mexico would be the places I would go to, some secret places there. So
That's
as old
awesome.
guys, we take the week off and go on a surf trip like we might go on a ski trip.
Yeah, but if you're going on a ski trip when you become 60, you're a surgeon. The last thing you want to do is break something or have an issue.
Right.
So we moved from the black diamonds down to the blues, right? So have you chilled out a little bit out on the board? You ride the big
Oh
board?
yeah,
What?
sense of, the big ways that a few near death experiences when you're young, you go, oh yeah, that was cool. But when you're old, you go, I'm not going to get to the surface. I'm going to get tired and die. So you go to certain places where it's you got it made, and then your limits. Obviously, like everybody, you figure out your limits. So
Yeah, no, I love it. All right, so this is an orthopedic show, so I guess
yes,
we should talk a little bit of orthopedics too. And so, you're a little bit of a unicorn. You're a rare species. I think that by the time people get to our ages in our careers, we have typically found a path. And as you said, you did a joint replacement fellowship out at Anderson Clinic
yeah.
in Virginia. You got away from California for a year. God bless you. And then but you've also been very passionate about restoring cartilage, So joint replacements for our listeners, as a general rule, you take the stuff out and you put metal in, and then you've got the cartilage preservationist people who are trying to preserve the cartilage. So you're swimming down the in two canoes down the river here. What's going on, man?
Well, I like to look at it as I come to the problem of joint preservation from a different end. Instead of a sports doc and seeing people get injured, then develop a cartilage lesion, I take care of people that are at the end of their joint life. And I think of a joint as an organ, right? So I think of arthritis as organ failure. So when you treat organ failure, you go, wow, how do we prevent organ failure? And I was fortunate enough to be mentored by some really good people at University of California, San Diego, and they happened to be innovators in this joint preservation in the late 70s, and got exposed to it as a resident. Said, this is really cool. Yeah, I could do joints, but this is cool too. And this is really intellectually challenging. And my chairman at the time, Wayne Akison, very famous guy, after my first little foray into the research, he said, Bill, you've got a lifetime of work ahead of you. And that kind of set the fire to do research. And as you know, joint replacement is pretty much a technical exercise. There's not, the thinking part, but joint preservation requires a lot of insight thinking and a lot of things to figure out. So I just loved it. And I've carried on with it, and I was at the right place at the right time, taking over a program and being at my start when the first paper on ACI came out in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1997. That set the world on fire with cartilage and rode the wave ever since. So I like to think of myself as a joint replacement doc because that's what most people need in the world. But I spend most of my intellectual pursuits trying to figure out how to prevent joint replacement or do things other than that. And you do the same thing I do. The biggest problem we have now is taking care of 30 to 50-year-olds that have really beat up joints from all the stuff they've done, and how to get them a quality life without an artificial joint. So it's
absolutely, absolutely well said. So for our listeners, ACI is autologous chondrocyte implantation. And for Judy that's listening, as always, basically we can take cartilage cells out of your knee and then we can grow it in culture. And then you could literally reimplant that cartilage with those cartilage cells back into your knee to be able to regrow. Now, it was for focal small defects and it's evolved tremendously. We'll talk a little bit more about that, as we get going in our conversation. But, I think that you are one of the worldwide leaders on osteochondral allograft. You started with it at the beginning. You've done all the research. You probably have 200 papers written on osteochondral allografts. So again, for our listeners out there, what is an osteochondral allograft and how do you use it?
Well, Scott, so you just mentioned cell-based therapy, transplanting cells. Allografting would be essentially transplanting whole intact tissue. So it's basically, people understand kidney transplantation, liver, whatever, all those things. We take pieces of the joint, which is osteochondral, bone and cartilage, from a donor, and these have living cartilage cells in them, and transplant the intact organ or tissue into a defect. So the human body's already made the part, we just put it in there. So it's sort of like patching a tile in your floor or something like that. So it's a long word, but it really means transplantation of whole tissue. Now, just to finish that thought, what's unique about bone and cartilage is bone will heal. So you can get a piece of bone to heal from another person into you. There's a mechanism. Everyone knows about fractured bones. They will always heal. Unique tissue. Cartilage, as you pointed out, doesn't heal, but cartilage does not require blood supply. So the cartilage cells are alive even without blood supply. They're nourished by the joint. So it's a really unique tissue to transplant, and it works because of these two features of the tissue. So we were one of the first people doing it, but as you've seen it evolve, more and more people try to say, hey, this really works. Where do we get the tissue? And that was the next problem, to get tissue access.
Yeah, and I sort of like the analogy of like the pothole, right? I mean, if you have a small enough pothole, you can drive your car over top of it and you're okay, right? But if the pothole is too big, then the car is going to fall in. And so talk a little bit about, the geography of where you can do these replacements within the knee, in particular, and then the size of the lesion, because I think that could be confusing, right? I just want to get one of those hair club for men transplant things, pop one of those in there. I don't want metal in my knee, but it's not available for everybody.
Yes. So, I like to think of the spectrum of disease. And so we may get into arthritis. That's what I treat. So people don't understand that you can define a pothole or a defect as a certain size, but you have to also describe what the rest of the joint is doing. Remember, it's an organ. So you have a hole in the knee, but if the organ around it, the ligaments, the meniscus, the synovium, all the lining and everything else is not healthy, it doesn't matter how big that pothole is. The joint is diseased. So if you have a joint that's healthy and you have a hole, you can patch it with almost anything. But when they get bigger and bigger, you need bigger and bigger tools. And what's beautiful and unique about the allograft is you can get a whole other joint, a whole other surface, and use your orthopedic skills to shape it into circles and squares and the whole surfaces. So you can replace essentially any part of the knee. And what's more is you can do it in almost any joint. 25% of the people we do this on are in the ankle. We do it in the elbow. We do it in the hip. Not so common indications, but you can put a new piece of joint surface almost anywhere in the body and it should work. So mostly the knee and mostly the bigger lesions. Although I will tell you that most of my colleagues that started out with other techniques have evolved, and it makes me feel good to know now they've come around to use more allografts because it's easy surgery for a skilled orthopedist. Recovery is quick because the tissue's already healed. So I would say any place, anywhere, anytime, but I would be careful about using these things in advanced arthritis. And that's usually where people get off the rails on this stuff.
Yeah, and it's kudos to you. I mean, because to be honest with you, you were there sort of at the infancy of the description of this technique. There are very few surgeries that survive 25 to 30 years. By the time we get to that level, we're usually moving on to something else. So what a remarkable, phase of your career to be able to see the entire process of that as it's evolved.
Yeah, and I feel great about that because it's popular now, but we soldiered on as the only people doing it. People were saying, "You're crazy. Why are you doing this?" But I would love to see us be able to stem cell fix these things, but that's still a pipe dream, as you know, and people, that's not going to be useful for some time. I would love to see a quote cure for arthritis. That's not going to happen anytime soon. So the fact that people see the utility of this form of joint preservation, to me, it's my greatest honor. And I like, I'm flattered that people copy, right? And I encourage, and part of my goal is to go out there and teach people how to do this because I don't want to be the only one. I want more people to do it so more patients get it. And that's been my greatest achievement, I think, to have people all over the world essentially have access to this technique when they need it.
As long as they don't move to La Jolla, because you've got that place carved out pretty good.
Oh, I got a new partner. He's doing it.
I know. I'm just
happy to show him. Yeah,
I know. Just having fun.
It's weird that way. Some people are very possessive about their thing, but I want to give it away.
Of course, as it should be. So look, I just went to River Road in Andover, Massachusetts, probably about 6 weeks ago down to Smith & Nephew. They just bought the Israeli company, and it's called Cartelige, where they're using a very specialized coral implant, literally the coral for our listeners that you go to a coral reef to be able to see. It's got to be a very specific coral, but they have about 10 years of experience and it just sort of got the FDA approval process. Where do you see Cartelige? Is that going to help to put you out of business with osteochondral allografts or no?
No, I don't think so. But, full disclosure, I have no interest in it, but I saw the first data I saw 15 years ago. And the guy, Ken Zaslav, who you might know, he showed it and I said, "Ken, this is really good data. Is it really true? Or is it, yes, no, it's actually real." And it's fascinating biology, But you understand in nature, things are conserved. Coral, for those listeners, is very much architecturally like bone. So it's an affinity that. The trick was to get this coral to make cartilage on the top. So I think it's useful. I think that it will help us, but they can't fill defects more than about 20 millimeters. This the way the science has come, the way the clinical studies. So they're a little careful, but interestingly, they got approval for treating arthritis, so you can put plugs everywhere. So there's a leap of faith, but I'm not sure because, again, arthritis is a big nut to crack. So I think it's helpful because there's more patients out there that need these kind of surgeries than there are allografts. And I think the science that I've seen is really interesting. So I'm eager to see if this is going to actually work or if the innovation cycle is going to go, yeah, this is fantastic. A lot of people do it. And then it kind of gets to a point where it's a little bit not a game changer. I've seen too many of these products come down the pipe that were like that, but this one seems different.
Yeah, it's promising. And I can tell you that one of the other cool things about it, and we'll talk a little bit more about Macy here in a minute, but it's off the shelf, right?
Yeah.
And so literally, I mean, as you said, you need a donor with living cartilage cells that has recently passed to be able to identify and create these osteochondral allografts. So with CartiHeal in particular, it's really literally off the shelf. You can see a relatively small defect, and you can, if you talk to the patient in advance based on the MRI, and it's a relatively small lesion, you can pop one of these right off the shelf. That's kind of innovative. That's neat.
Yeah, no, clearly you hit on the point. Logistical challenges for fresh allografts have remained. We've gotten better with amount of tissue available, but the logistics still cause hiccups. So having an off-the-shelf option, as you pointed out, clearly is an advancement, and should be supported.
Agreed. Now, all right, let's talk about, first of all, I love the fact that the joint is an organ. I really, really appreciate that concept. So people that know me, I'm the laser guy. And so when I think of arthritis, I think of cytokines, right? So these cytokines are these proteins, and there's some good cytokines and there's some bad cytokines, right? And so the bad cytokines are making all kinds of inflammation, breaking down cartilage, and creating an arthritis and a bad sort of milieu inside the organ, right? So I want to know, what are your thoughts on like the orthobiologics, which is a cellular-based therapy, but it's autologous. It has to be used from the same patient, right? It can't be mass produced. We're using the laser routinely to try and help out with that, with the metabolism of that organ known as the joint. Where do you think cartilage regeneration is going to go? Because it's been an annuity for us, right? Cartilage cells don't grow, they can't cross. And for old guys like me and you, we knew that we were always going to have a job, right? Because it doesn't come back. So where do you think we're going?
Growth industry, there's no doubt about that. And at the demographics of the world and the increasing participation in sport, I'm not worried about my joint replacement practice. In fact, I'm drinking from a fire hose trying to keep up in that regard. So, I think the promise is there, and this is why our field is so fascinating, because there's so many things to figure out to get better at, and the public is really fascinated by the idea that you can just inject something in them and you grow back, because after all, we started as a one-celled organism and we grew to this complex thing. Why can't we reiterate that in a knee joint? But it's more complicated than that, isn't it? Most of what we do in medicine, we take a problem and we hit it with a sledgehammer instead of tickling it with a feather. And for example, injecting an orthobiologic, PRP, into a joint. There's 1,400 cytokines in PRP, right? Which one's doing the work? Exactly. So you're hitting it with a hammer, hoping that something good will happen. But we should be tickling it with a feather and sort of just moving it along. I think of the analogy is back when we were doing fracture care, I remember this quote, we're all about putting plates on and screws and getting everything just right. But someone said, we should be tending to this like a gardener rather than a carpenter. And that was 30 years ago. Someone said we should be gardeners, not carpenters. And here we are trying to be gardeners, growing healthy joints. So I think right now the problem in this field is entrepreneurism, right? So everyone wants to sell stuff and create expectation that's not true. And yeah, we have our clinic here, and every time I tell someone that I can't grow their cartilage back, but I will think that maybe if I inject them with an orthobiologic, they might feel better. They go, well, I thought that you might be able to reverse my arthritis. And they lose interest pretty quick and it's the disinformation, misinformation is a problem. So I'm really curious to see how it goes. And I believe that we have tools that are biologics that are better than corticosteroid or HA, but then it becomes who's paying for it.
I think your point is so well taken. I like to think of it as, I guess, a shotgun, right? Within PRP or BMAC or any of these orthobiologics that we're using, platelet-rich plasma, for our listeners, it's like a shotgun pellet. There's like 1,000 pellets in there trying to do something. Wouldn't it be cool if we could identify the pellet that's really doing the work? And I think that's what big pharma will probably get to. They'll identify some of the, these really specific, feather tickling cytokines that we're looking for to create some healing.
Well, the prototype, of course, is how we've managed inflammatory arthritis. For your listeners, rheumatoid arthritis or some of these other ones, they figured out what molecule needed to be turned on or off. And they developed a drug that blocked that. And they pretty much eradicated rheumatoid arthritis from my orthopedic practice by a simple biologic. We haven't been able to replicate that in the arthritis or degenerative knee or joint field, but that's the model, right? They got one drug, well, there's a couple of different targets. They found a target, one biologic hits that target, changes the whole disease process.
Yeah, I think that's going to be coming. That's going to be, I think, the change. Look, you and I, we spent some time at the California Orthopedic Association meeting not too long ago, and I was fortunate enough to be there to hear your talk with Cassandra Lee, as well as, Seth Sherman, and really talking about cellular-based, cartilage. We talked about ACI. Well, there's now the Macy procedure, which I think is really, pretty fascinating. And now I've also been privy that there's an arthroscopic technique coming out, right? Again, a couple of old guys like you and I were, since 1996, we've been following AC and Macy. So, I mean, are you doing some Macy in practice, or do you give that to the arthroscopic or the sports guys?
Yeah, here's the thing. When it first came out, I learned how to do it, got the technique down and everything else. But realistically, when you're the guy and everyone thinks of you as an allograft surgeon, your practice goes that way.
Sure.
Say not a Macy. So I've done it in the lab but never done it in a human. But that's okay, because if someone wants to do that, I have colleagues like John Lane, it's people like that I say, you want to go do that? That's fine. And I felt, again, for my career, it's been very beneficial to be thought of as the expert in one specific thing and not try to be all things to all people. That said, they've evolved 3 iterations of it. Your point about allografts have been kind of the same. We have better techniques, but the same, whereas Macy and ACI has changed. They're getting better and better at it to make it easier for more average and less eclectic surgeons to do the thing. So I think they've made some breakthroughs, and I think and again, I would tell people, I don't think allografts necessarily have better outcome in a similar patient. It's just a different way to do things. So
and the other thing that they've done very well with Vericel compared to just about every other new device that comes onto the market is they've developed the research and the backing, and they have reimbursement. I mean, they literally have over decades developed relationships with commercial payers. So if you have the right lesion, literally, which is a relatively expensive, process, they'll get reimbursed. The hospital in which the treatment's being done is satisfied because they get enough money to be paid. The surgeon is able to take care of the patient. The patient gets a good outcome. So from that perspective, there's a lot of real
really an economic model that fixed their big problem, which was
Yes.
never getting approved. I tell you a short story. Back in 90s, the only people that you could ever get approved for some of these joint preservation surgeries were workman's compensation or other things where they had no choice. They had to cover it. But otherwise, it was really hard to get it approved. Now they've taken some of the economics out of the hospital cost center, and it's made it useful. And allografts are not cheap, but it's not quite the Macy cost. So we still are able to do it, but it's an economic question all the time.
Listen, Bill, I mean, I think that this has been so enlightening for me. I mean, we could talk another 2 hours about your joint replacement practice, but I'm just a sports guy anyway. I don't know if I would contribute to that. Just kidding. But no. I mean, this has been wonderful. It really, what a tremendous history, you've had in a technique that has evolved over time, and you have stuck by it. And, to literally be one of the world's leaders on a technique that has stuck around for 25 years is really quite remarkable. We want to thank you for your time, your passion for research, for educating, those around the world about the techniques that you're doing in beautiful La Jolla. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. It's been fun. I enjoyed speaking with you. We could talk all day, but it's been great. Thank you.
I'm going to let you know next time I come out. I'm not going surfing with you, but we're going to go play Torrey Pines because you could set up a tee time for us right out the backyard there.
Yeah, there you go. Gotcha. No problem.
All right. We love it. This is Dr. Scott Sigman, #FollowTheFro, host of The Ortho Show. Till next time.